Stop, listen, pay attention. Chosen one. This moment is not passing by accident. It is interrupting you because it has to. What you are feeling right now is not random noise in your mind, or another wave you should push through quietly. You have been carrying a specific kind of fatigue, not just tiredness, but a pressure that sits beneath the surface and doesn't fully leave when you rest. You have stayed functional, shown up, answered messages, handled responsibilities, yet something inside you has felt stretched thinner than usual. You may not have had the language for it. You may have simply told yourself to keep going. There has also been a quiet isolation around you. Even when people are present, you may have felt slightly out of sync, as if your inner experience didn't translate cleanly into conversation. Not loneliness in the obvious sense, but a sense of standing alone inside your own awareness. That experience is real. It deserves clarity, not dismissal. Confusion may have visited you as well. Not dramatic confusion, not panic, but moments where decisions felt heavier than they should have. Where familiar paths required more effort, where you noticed yourself pausing longer, thinking more carefully, conserving energy without fully understanding why. This message is intentional. It is not designed to motivate you or excite you. It is meant to explain something you already lived through but have not yet fully processed. You are not being told what might happen. You are being shown what already occurred. There has been urgency around you without fear. A sense that something was moving, tightening, testing the edges of your stability. And yet despite that pressure, you did not collapse. You did not disappear. You did not lose coherence. You stayed here, present, aware, intact. That matters more than you realize. What you outlasted was subtle. It did not announce itself loudly. It did not need to. It worked through weight delay and quiet resistance. And still you remained. Not because you fought harder, but because something in you was already structured to endure. This is not a general address. It is not meant for everyone listening. It is precise. It meets you exactly where you are, after what you have already survived, and before you name it incorrectly. Stay with this. Clarity is coming, and it will not overwhelm you. This message is for you specifically, and it is important to remove any remaining ambiguity about that. Not everyone who hears these words will recognize themselves in them. Some will listen with curiosity, some will listen with interest, but recognition is different. You did not arrive here by browsing. You arrived because something in you aligned with what was already forming beneath the surface. You are addressed as the chosen one, not as a title to elevate you, but as a description of function. You were involved directly in what occurred. This was not an abstract idea or a distant observation. Your internal system was engaged. Your awareness, your energy, your stability were tested in ways that did not require your conscious consent. What makes this significant is not that you notice the pressure. Many people notice pressure. What matters is how you responded without trying to respond. There was no dramatic shift, no decisive moment where you told yourself to be strong. You simply remained. You kept moving through your days. You adapted quietly. You adjusted your pace, your attention, your expectations, without fully articulating why. That kind of response is not learned in the moment. It is automatic. It emerges when strength is already integrated rather than summoned. You did not have to convince yourself to hold together. You already were. There is an important distinction here. Conscious struggle is loud. It requires effort, self-talk, repetition, and reinforcement. It burns energy quickly. Unconscious stability is quieter. It holds without commentary. It absorbs without panic. It does not announce itself because it does not need to. You may have underestimated this about yourself because you are used to measuring strength by intensity. But intensity was not required. The situation did not ask you to rise. It asked you not to fall. And you didn't. This is how you know this message is for you. You did not feel victorious. You felt steady. You did not feel dramatic relief. You felt continuity. Life did not reset. It continued. And that continuity is the evidence. What happened involved you directly because it passed through you and did not disrupt your core. Others in similar conditions often fragment, withdraw, or lose orientation. You remained oriented, even when you were tired, even when you were unsure, even when you felt the weight. This is not about assigning you a role you must perform. It is about acknowledging what is already true. You carry a baseline of resistance that does not require activation. It is present even when you are not thinking about it. Hold that recognition gently. There is more to understand, and understanding will bring relief rather than pressure. There is one dominant symptom you likely recognized immediately, even if you never named it out loud. It was not panic. It was not despair. It was a persistent internal heaviness that seemed disproportionate to what was happening externally. You may have asked yourself why simple things felt denser, why motivation required more intention, why your body and mind seemed to be conserving energy without explanation. That sensation was not a flaw in you. It was a signal. You were not becoming weaker. You were responding to sustained pressure. When systems are under continuous load, they shift into preservation mode. This is not failure. It is intelligence. Your internal structure adjusted before damage could occur. You may have judged yourself for this. You may have thought you were losing momentum, losing clarity, losing your edge. But that judgment came from misunderstanding the signal. What you felt was not collapse approaching. It was stabilization activating. There is a difference. When people are overwhelmed, they fragment. Their thoughts scatter. Their emotions spike. Their behavior becomes erratic. What you experienced was the opposite. Your awareness narrowed. Your focus became more selective. Your energy stopped spilling into unnecessary directions. That narrowing can feel like heaviness if you are used to operating at full outward output. But narrowing is not shrinking. It is consolidation. Your body and mind were reducing noise. They were protecting coherence. That is why you may have felt less tolerant of distractions, less interested in superficial interactions, less willing to engage in dynamics that once felt neutral. Your system was signaling that something required stability more than stimulation. This is where confusion often enters. Without context, people assume something is wrong. They try to push through, override the signal force performance back to a previous level. You may have attempted this briefly and noticed it cost more than it gave. That was not laziness. That was feedback. The heaviness was informational. It was your internal architecture responding to pressure by grounding itself deeper. Think of it as weight shifting downward to increase balance. From the inside, that feels slower. From the outside, it looks calm. You did not lose yourself during this period. You stayed aware. You stayed functional. You stayed connected to reality, even if your enthusiasm dipped and your patience was tested. That combination matters. It shows that the signal did not impair you. It guided you. Remove the self-judgment now. You did not misread your capacity. You honored it instinctively. You allowed yourself to move at a pace that preserved integrity, even without fully understanding why. This symptom was not an ending. It was a threshold indicator, a message that pressure was present and that your system was capable of withstanding it without breaking shape. What you felt makes sense in context, and the context is deeper than you were shown at the time. Stay with this understanding. The explanation is becoming clearer. What you were responding to did not come from your imagination. There was an invisible layer of pressure operating around you, and it was not chaotic. It was structured. It arrived in a narrow window of time, intensified gradually, and targeted specific points of strain rather than overwhelming everything at once. This matters because random stress behaves differently. Random stress is noisy. It fluctuates. It comes and goes without pattern. What you encountered was consistent. It lingered. It pressed without announcing itself. You could feel it most clearly during moments that should have been neutral. Ordinary tasks felt heavier. Transitions required more effort. Silence felt charged rather than restful. This pressure did not seek your attention. It did not need to. It relied on accumulation. Small weights layered over time, each one manageable on its own, but together capable of destabilizing someone without them noticing when it began. The timing was not accidental. It aligned with a period when you were already extending yourself, already holding responsibility, already maintaining balance. Pressure applied to a system under load reveals structure. Weak systems fracture. Coherent systems adapt. You adapted. Despite the added strain, you remained operational. You did not disengage from life. You did not abandon your responsibilities. You did not lose your sense of self. You may have slowed, simplified, or pulled back slightly, but you did not disappear. That distinction is critical. The pressure attempted to narrow your options without your consent. It showed up as delays, as resistance, as subtle interruptions that made progress feel less efficient. And still you stayed present. You recalibrated without dramatizing the experience. You made quieter choices. You conserved energy. You stayed aware of your inner state instead of outsourcing your stability to external validation. This was a form of confrontation, but not the kind that looks like conflict. There were no visible opponents, no dramatic events, just a sustained test of coherence. Could you remain yourself while conditions pressed inward? You did. Many people only recognize pressure when it becomes unbearable. By then, the system is already compromised. You recognized it while it was still manageable. Your awareness stayed online. That is why you never lost orientation, even when you felt stretched. This was not about overpowering something. It was about not being reshaped by it. The pressure did not break you, because it could not find chaos to amplify. It could not exploit fragmentation, because there was none available. That is not accidental. That is the result of internal alignment built over time. What you remained through was recent, coordinated, and intentional in its design. And the most important detail is this. You did not need to know what it was in order to withstand it. Your structure responded before your mind could explain it. That is the mark of something already integrated. Now that this layer is visible, the experience begins to organize itself. What felt heavy begins to make sense. What felt unclear starts to align. And from here, the details become easier to examine. What you moved through can be understood more clearly when it is broken down into its pressure points. Not as dramatic events, but as lived psychological experiences that unfolded quietly and persistently. There were several distinct areas where strain appeared, each one subtle enough to be dismissed on its own, yet meaningful when viewed together. The first pressure point was doubt, but not the loud kind that questions everything. This doubt was understated. It showed up as a soft erosion of certainty around timing, direction, and effort. You may have found yourself wondering whether things were taking too long, whether your consistency was still meaningful, whether your internal compass was as reliable as it once felt. The key detail is that this doubt did not paralyze you. You continued to act. You continued to choose. You did not spiral. You noticed the questions, but they did not replace your sense of self. That restraint matters. It shows that doubt touched the edges of your awareness without entering the center. The second pressure point was fear, but again, not fear as panic. It was anticipatory tension, a subtle readiness for something to go wrong, a background alertness that stayed switched on longer than usual. Many people collapse under this kind of sustained vigilance. They either numb themselves or overreact. You did neither. You remained observant without becoming reactive. You allowed caution without letting it harden into anxiety. That balance requires internal regulation. It cannot be improvised. The third pressure point was energy drain. This was perhaps the most tangible. Your energy did not disappear suddenly. It thinned. Tasks that once felt neutral began to require more intention. You may have needed more recovery time, more quiet, more space between engagements. Importantly, you did not waste energy pretending this wasn't happening. You adjusted, you simplified, you prioritized what mattered. That adjustment preserved your system. People who ignore energy signals often burn out dramatically. You did not. You downshifted before damage occurred. The fourth pressure point was isolation. Not physical isolation, but experiential separation. You may have felt that explaining what you were carrying would take more effort than staying silent. Conversations may have felt slightly misaligned. Support may have felt distant, even when available. Instead of forcing connection that did not fit you, stayed contained. You did not internalize the isolation as rejection. You understood instinctively that this was a temporary narrowing, not abandonment. That interpretation protected you from unnecessary emotional strain. The fifth pressure point was delay. Progress did not stop, but it slowed in ways that tested patience. Outcomes took longer. Responses came later. Momentum felt muted. Delay is one of the most effective destabilizers because it invites meaning-making. People begin to invent explanations that erode confidence. You noticed the delay, but you did not attach your worth to it. You continued to show up without demanding immediate confirmation. That steadiness kept your internal rhythm intact. Across all these categories, one pattern holds. You stayed regulated. You did not escalate internally. You did not collapse externally. You allowed pressure to exist without turning it into a personal failure. That is not accidental behavior. That is the expression of a system that trusts itself enough to remain calm under strain. You did not fight these pressure points. You absorbed them. You adjusted around them. You maintained coherence while they passed through. That is why even now you may feel tired but not broken, reflective but not lost, quieter but not diminished. This is what it means to outlast something without dramatizing it. You did not need a breakthrough moment. You needed continuity, and you maintained it. Understanding this reframes the entire experience. What you endured was real. How you endured it reveals something stable and already present within you. Let that settle. Now there is space to look back without tension and to review what occurred with clarity rather than emotion. When distance is added, patterns become visible. What once felt like a continuous weight begins to separate into identifiable movements. This is where confirmation replaces speculation. You can see now that what you moved through was not a series of unrelated difficulties. It had internal consistency. The pressure increased without warning, remained steady without escalation, and then released without ceremony. There was no dramatic resolution, just a return of internal breathing room. That sequence alone removes coincidence from the explanation. Nothing external suddenly fixed itself. Circumstances did not radically change. And yet something inside you recalibrated. The heaviness lifted not because effort increased, but because pressure stopped applying force. That distinction matters. It confirms that your stability was never dependent on external relief. It is important to state this plainly. You did not survive because you were lucky. You did not endure because conditions were mild. You endured because your internal system remained coherent while pressure was present. Coherence is not optimism. It is not positive thinking. It is alignment between perception, emotion, and response. You stayed aligned. When people attribute endurance to luck, they remove agency from the system that held them together. When they attribute it to coincidence, they miss the intelligence of their own regulation. You do not need either explanation. The evidence is internal and observable. Look at how you responded when pressure peaked. You did not abandon yourself. You did not override your signals. You did not dissociate or numb out. You stayed in contact with your inner state. You adjusted behavior without self-betrayal. That level of self-connection under strain is measurable resilience. You may also notice something else in review. Despite the strain, your values did not shift. You did not compromise what mattered most to gain relief. You did not trade integrity for comfort. That consistency under pressure confirms that your core was not destabilized. Many people appear functional until their values are tested. Yours remained intact. This realization brings relief because it removes the need to prove anything. You do not need to replay the experience looking for mistakes. You do not need to correct your response retroactively. You handled it in real time with the information you had, and you did so effectively. Understanding replaces doubt here. The question is no longer, why did this happen to me? The question becomes, what allowed me to remain whole while it happened? And the answer is already evident in your behavior. You were internally resilient, not because you tried to be, but because your structure was already in place. This review confirms what your nervous system knew before your mind could articulate it. Let that understanding settle into you. It is not meant to elevate you. It is meant to ground you in what is true. From this grounded position, comparison becomes possible without distortion. When your experience is placed alongside typical human responses to sustained pressure, its distinctiveness becomes clearer without needing exaggeration. Most people do not collapse because of one overwhelming event. They unravel through accumulation. Small pressures stack energy drains unnoticed, and stability erodes gradually until something gives. Under far less strain than what you endured, many people lose presence. They become reactive. Their attention scatters. Emotional responses spike or flatten. They begin to operate from survival rather than awareness. This is not a flaw. It is a common response to unmanaged pressure. What sets your experience apart is not that you avoided discomfort. You did not. You felt the weight. You noticed the drag. You recognized the narrowing. The difference is that you stayed here. You did not check out. You did not hand control over to impulse distraction or self-criticism. While others might have collapsed into agitation or withdrawal, you remained functional. You continued to engage with life at a reduced but steady pace. You did not need constant reassurance to keep moving. You did not demand immediate relief to stay oriented. That capacity is uncommon, not because it is superior, but because it requires internal familiarity with pressure. Many people only feel regulated when conditions are calm. Regulation leaves them as soon as strain appears. Your regulation remained available even while strain persisted. That is the distinction. This is not about toughness. Toughness often ignores signals until damage occurs. You did the opposite. You listened. You adjusted. You allowed yourself to be quieter, slower, more selective. And in doing so, you preserved coherence. It is rare for someone to remain present without becoming rigid. It is rare to slow down without collapsing. It is rare to experience isolation without internalizing it as rejection. And yet you did each of these. This rarity does not place you above others. It simply places you in a smaller group of people whose systems have been shaped by prior adaptation. Experience has taught your inner structure how to hold itself together without forcing performance. You may not have seen this as strength at the time. It may have felt unremarkable or even concerning. But in comparison, it stands out clearly. Most people require external stabilization when pressure rises. You carried yours internally. This recognition is meant to inform, not inflate. There is no pedestal here. There is clarity. Knowing that your baseline includes this level of stability helps you interpret future experiences accurately. It prevents mislabeling regulation as withdrawal or composure as numbness. You remain steady where many would not. That is simply true. And understanding that truth allows you to relate to yourself with greater precision rather than unnecessary doubt. From here, the identity that fits you can be clarified without drama. What becomes clear now is that your strength did not switch on in response to this experience. It was already present. What you demonstrated was not activation, but baseline. You did not rise to meet the moment. You met it already standing. This distinction matters because it reframes how you understand yourself. If strength only appears in crisis, it is conditional. It depends on adrenaline urgency or necessity. What you exhibited was structural. It existed before pressure arrived and remained after it passed. Your stability is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with intensity or confidence. It shows up as coherence, as the ability to stay oriented to reality without distortion, as the capacity to feel strain without becoming consumed by it. That is not something learned quickly. It is the result of internal preparation that often goes unnoticed because it does not look impressive from the outside. You have spent time building inner order, sometimes deliberately, sometimes through necessity. You learned how to regulate your attention, your emotional responses, your energy output. You learned when to engage and when to pause. Over time, this became automatic. You no longer need to think about it. This is why the recent pressure did not redefine you. It did not introduce a new version of yourself. It simply revealed the one that was already operating quietly in the background. Your system knew how to respond because it had done this before. Perhaps in different forms, perhaps under different names. There is no need to attribute this to anything mystical or extraordinary. The explanation is grounded. You have internal structure. You have psychological maturity. You have learned how to hold complexity without fragmenting. These are measurable qualities, even if they are rarely acknowledged. When you hear the phrase, chosen one in this context, it does not imply destiny or hierarchy. It describes selection through adaptation. Your system has been shaped by experience in a way that allows it to remain intact under pressure. That is the choosing. Not by an external force, but by repeated survival with awareness. You are not meant to carry more because of this. You are not required to endure endlessly. Understanding your baseline is meant to remove confusion, not add obligation. It allows you to trust your internal signals and respect your limits without questioning your capacity. This identity does not demand performance. It offers clarity. You can stop waiting for proof that you are capable. The evidence is already lived. You do not need to recreate pressure to confirm it. Hold this understanding gently. It is not a label you must wear. It is a description that fits because it is accurate. And accuracy brings calm. With that calm, you are ready to integrate what you know into how you move forward. Now that the experience has been named accurately, the next step is integration. Not analysis, not vigilance, but orientation. What you have learned about yourself is meant to support how you live, not dominate your attention. Integration is quiet. It shows up in small, practical shifts that protect balance. First, rest without justification. You do not need to earn recovery by exhaustion. Your system has already demonstrated resilience. Allowing rest now is not indulgence. It is maintenance. When rest is intentional, it restores clarity rather than dulling it. Let your nervous system return fully to baseline before demanding output. Second, practice discernment rather than urgency. You no longer need to react quickly to prove stability. Slow decisions are not weak decisions. They are accurate ones. Notice what requires your energy and what merely asks for it. You are allowed to say no without explanation when alignment is absent. Third, reinforce boundaries gently. You may find that your tolerance for unnecessary complexity has decreased. Honor that. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They keep your internal coherence intact by limiting exposure to dynamics that drain without contributing. You do not need to withdraw from life to stay regulated. You only need to be selective. Fourth exercise, patience without stagnation. Momentum does not always look like speed. Sometimes it looks like consistency without strain. Continue showing up in the ways that feel sustainable. Trust that progress measured over time carries more integrity than bursts followed by depletion. Fifth, focus attention where it nourishes rather than depletes. You are especially sensitive now to where your awareness goes. Choose inputs that stabilize you. Reduce noise. Simplify information streams. This is not avoidance. It is alignment. Sixth, maintain connection without overexposure. You do not need to isolate to protect yourself. 1 or 2 grounded points of connection are enough. Quality matters more than quantity. Let conversations be real rather than performative. None of these perspectives require vigilance. They are not rules to follow. They are orientations that emerge naturally when you trust your internal signals. You have already proven that you can respond intelligently to pressure. Now you are simply allowing that intelligence to guide daily life. This integration phase is not dramatic. It feels like settling, like breathing deeper without effort, like returning to yourself without urgency. You are not preparing for another test. You are stabilizing after one you already passed. Let that be enough. When you are ready, this understanding will close itself naturally, leaving clarity where confusion once sat. You can rest now. Not because something extraordinary is about to happen, but because something important has already completed. What you needed to remain through has passed, and it passed without taking you with it. That is the quiet truth at the center of this entire experience. You did not defeat anything by force. You did not overcome through intensity. You simply stayed intact. You remained yourself while pressure attempted to reshape you, and when that pressure could not find instability to work with it, collapsed on its own. Not loudly, not dramatically. It just stopped holding weight. This is the realization to keep. You do not need to brace yourself for what comes next. You do not need to replay what happened to extract more meaning. The meaning is already integrated. You are still here, still coherent, still oriented, still able to move forward without needing to prove your strength. Let that settle into your body and your mind. You are allowed to trust your internal steadiness. You are allowed to move at a pace that protects your clarity. You are allowed to release the idea that survival must look dramatic to be real. If words help anchor understanding, hold these affirmations gently. You remained whole under pressure. Your stability is real and repeatable. You do not need to rush to confirm your worth. If this message aligned with your lived experience, mark it quietly. In the comments write, "I remember," or simply 7, 7, 7. Not for visibility, for acknowledgement. A signal to yourself that you recognized what you moved through. If you want to stay connected to messages like this, consider subscribing. Not because you need guidance, but because clarity compounds when it is reinforced. The next transmission will meet you where you are, not where you are expected to be. There is nothing you need to do right now. No action to take. No conclusion to reach. Just the calm certainty that what tried to wear you down could not outlast your structure. You are steady. You are present. And you are already moving forward even in stillness. This is enough.